Have you ever asked yourself why the very men who give everything, who stay loyal, who pour out affection without measure, so often end up abandoned or betrayed by the women they loved most? In today's world, where relationships unfold not just in private, but under the constant gaze of social media, this question has become even more urgent. A man can dedicate years of his life to a woman, providing stability, love, and devotion, only to watch her walk away for someone who seems to offer less but excites her more. It is a story we see everywhere, not just in whispered confessions, but in public posts, in viral videos of heartbreak, in digital confessions that spread faster than truth itself. For men, the pain cuts deeper because they believe their loyalty should have been enough, that their commitment was supposed to protect them from the possibility of betrayal. Yet the harsh reality is that love alone has never been a shield, and Schopenhauer saw this long before our modern world magnified it, with likes, follows, and fleeting online validation. The man who gives all of himself becomes convinced that devotion secures permanence, but devotion often blinds him to what is really happening. Women, driven not only by feeling, but by forces deeper and less visible, respond to the pull of novelty, the pressure of vanity, and the hunger for validation that today's endless digital mirrors amplify without rest. The very platforms that men use to declare their love also expose their partners to infinite comparisons, each one suggesting that something better may exist just one swipe away. Schopenhauer argued that beneath romance lies the will to life, the unconscious instinct pushing choices that seem irrational to the man who thought love was rational. This is where betrayal begins, and this is where we must look if we are ever to understand it. A man in love often convinces himself that his loyalty is enough to keep a woman by his side, yet this conviction rarely survives reality. We see this today in countless relationships where men give their time, money, and attention, believing that such sacrifice guarantees permanence, only to discover that devotion by itself does not prevent betrayal. A man may drive her to work, support her career, attend family gatherings, and still find himself replaced by someone who shows up with nothing more than excitement or unpredictability. In the modern world, the illusion of devotion is even stronger because men are taught that if they simply prove themselves reliable and caring, then loyalty must follow. They believe that love is a kind of transaction where consistency secures commitment. But life does not work like that, because devotion is not the same as desire, and love cannot be bought with routine. This illusion is fed by the culture around us, one that praises stability but secretly rewards novelty. Men believe that devotion builds security, yet security can feel suffocating to someone who equates comfort with stagnation. While a man imagines that his unwavering love strengthens the bond, she may interpret the same actions as predictable and uninspiring. Real life shows this every day. Men who dedicate themselves entirely are often the ones who cannot understand why betrayal strikes them hardest. They confuse effort with influence, thinking that the more they give, the more control they have over outcomes. The truth is that devotion does not guarantee loyalty, because loyalty is not simply a response to effort. It is tied to deeper instincts and shifting desires that no amount of consistency can control. This is why the illusion of devotion is so dangerous, because it blinds men to the reality that betrayal can arrive even in the presence of absolute love. Every man who falls deeply in love builds an image in his mind that is far greater than the woman in front of him. He convinces himself that she embodies purity, loyalty, and grace, and he treats her as if she were the answer to everything he has longed for. Yet this idealization rarely matches the reality of human nature. In today's world, this is even more visible because men are constantly bombarded with curated images of women in movies, advertisements, and online platforms that present perfection as if it were normal. When a man finally enters a real relationship, he projects this same perfection onto the woman he loves, ignoring her flaws and convincing himself that she could never hurt him. But human nature does not bend to fantasy, and no matter how much he idealizes her, she will act according to instincts, emotions, and circumstances that have nothing to do with his dream. This clash between ideal and reality is where many betrayals begin. Men are devastated not only because of the act itself, but because it shatters the image they built, the fantasy that blinded them from the truth. In real life, we see this constantly. Men who believe they have found the perfect partner are the ones most shocked when she begins to drift, when she grows restless, or when she chooses someone else. They ask themselves how the person they worshipped could betray them, but the answer is that they never saw her clearly. They were in love with a version of her that existed only in their imagination. The pain of betrayal is amplified because it is not just the relationship that collapses, but the illusion of perfection that collapses with it. Reality always wins against idealization, and those who refuse to see this pay the highest price. When a man is betrayed, he often searches for a reason that makes sense to him. But the truth is that many of the choices people make in love are not rational decisions. Beneath the surface, there are instincts and drives that shape behavior long before conscious thought takes over. In modern relationships, we see this everywhere. A woman may leave a man who has stood by her side for years to pursue someone who seems reckless, unavailable, or unstable. And from the outside, it looks like a terrible mistake. Yet the choice is not always about logic or fairness. It is about a deeper pull that is tied to survival and desire. Just as people crave food when they are not hungry or chase recognition they do not need, relationships are often guided by impulses that have nothing to do with loyalty or gratitude. These hidden motives explain why betrayal seems so senseless to men who have given their all. They look at their consistency and ask why it was not enough. But what drives attraction and loyalty is not always consistency. In today's world, this becomes even clearer because life is filled with constant comparisons. Workplaces, gyms, and everyday social circles expose people to countless alternatives that awaken dormant desires. A woman may not betray out of malice, but because she is unconsciously responding to signals of strength, status, or vitality that she perceives in someone else. What devastates the loyal man is the realization that love is not only about his actions, it is also about forces outside of his control. Hidden motives are not seen until they surface, and by the time they appear, it is often too late. Understanding this does not remove the pain, but it explains why betrayal often feels inevitable despite devotion. Many men believe that providing stability is the ultimate way to secure loyalty, yet reality shows that security often produces the opposite effect. In real relationships, the man who removes uncertainty, who solves problems quickly, and who makes life predictable can unintentionally create a sense of routine that dulls attraction. What he sees as love and responsibility can be interpreted as monotony by the woman who no longer feels tension, curiosity, or unpredictability. In modern life, we can see this paradox in countless homes, where the man who works tirelessly, pays the bills, and makes everything run smoothly ends up being replaced by someone who offers less stability, but more emotional disruption. It is not that women consciously reject comfort. It is that comfort can silence the very spark that made the connection exciting in the beginning. This paradox is made worse by the pace of today's world, where stimulation is constant and attention spans are short. People scroll through endless choices of entertainment, news, and opportunities, and this constant search for stimulation spills into relationships as well. A man who believes that security is enough may discover that it is precisely his consistency that makes him invisible. She may start seeking intensity elsewhere, not because she is ungrateful, but because she feels the weight of predictability pressing down on her. This is why betrayal often shocks men who thought they had done everything right. They believed that removing struggle was the ultimate form of love. Yet in removing struggle, they also remove the energy that fuels desire. Security is valuable, but when it becomes the only thing a relationship offers, it can feel like a cage. The paradox is that the very protection he builds can become the reason she walks away. In many relationships, betrayal does not appear suddenly, but grows silently behind a mask of gratitude. A woman may stay with a man she no longer desires, offering polite words and gestures of appreciation, while inside she feels restless and disconnected. This happens often because people are taught to avoid confrontation, to keep peace at the surface, even when dissatisfaction grows beneath it. In today's world, this silence is easier to maintain. Couples share pictures of dinners, vacations, and celebrations, giving the impression of happiness, while in private resentment is quietly building. The man sees smiles and hears thank you, so he assumes the bond is safe, but what he does not see is the slow erosion of attraction and connection. Gratitude can hide disappointment for years until one day it collapses, and betrayal appears as if out of nowhere. Reality shows us that betrayal rarely comes from hate, it often comes from exhaustion. A woman who continues to pretend that she is fulfilled eventually reaches a point where the performance becomes unbearable. She may have convinced herself to stay for security, for family, or for fear of change, but desire cannot be buried forever. The mask of gratitude falls when she chooses to follow what she truly feels, and the man is left shocked because he believed her words, rather than the silence behind them. This is why so many men feel blindsided. They mistake politeness for passion, routine appreciation for genuine connection. They never noticed that what was keeping her close was obligation rather than desire. The betrayal that follows is not only the loss of trust, but the realization that the relationship had been over long before the final act. What was hidden by gratitude becomes clear only when it is too late. Every man has seen it happen. A woman leaves behind someone who was loyal and reliable to pursue another who offers nothing but unpredictability. To the man who gave everything, this decision looks reckless, yet in reality, it reflects a deeper attraction to what is unfamiliar. People today live in a constant cycle of stimulation, where new experiences, new shows, new travels, and new people compete for attention every day. This constant exposure makes routine feel heavier than it once did. A stable relationship may provide comfort, but comfort can lose its shine when the unknown promises intensity. The unknown is seductive because it offers the possibility of emotions that routine cannot recreate. It is not that the loyal man failed. It is that his predictability made him invisible compared to the thrill of uncertainty. The modern world amplifies this tendency because access to novelty is everywhere. A conversation with a stranger during a trip, a new colleague at work, or a chance meeting at a social gathering can awaken curiosity that disrupts years of stability. The loyal man often cannot understand how something so small could outweigh his sacrifices, yet the power of the unknown is not measured by logic. It is measured by the emotional charge it brings. The possibility of something different, even if it is untested or unstable, can outweigh years of consistency in the mind of someone who feels trapped by repetition. This is why betrayal often comes from places that seem trivial. A single spark of novelty can burn through the weight of routine, leaving the man who gave everything questioning how loyalty lost to curiosity. The seduction of the unknown is not rational, but it is real, and it explains why betrayal so often defies common sense. A man rarely loves a woman as she is. More often, he loves the version of her that he has created in his mind, a projection shaped by his hopes, fears, and unmet needs. He gives her qualities she may never have possessed, imagining depth where there is only surface, imagining permanence where there is only change. In today's world, this projection is intensified because men are conditioned to believe that finding the right partner will complete them, that happiness is secured once they meet the one. The tragedy begins when reality does not match the projection. When she acts in ways that contradict the image he built, he does not see her as she truly is. He sees her as a betrayal of the story he told himself. This is why the pain of betrayal cuts so deep. It is not only the loss of the relationship, but the collapse of the illusion that gave his life meaning. Reality shows us this collapse in countless examples. Men who dedicate years of loyalty are often devastated, not only by what she did, but by the realization that they never truly knew her. They realize that much of their love was directed not at the person in front of them, but at the fantasy they created. This projection explains why betrayal feels like theft. It is not only her actions that wound him, it is the destruction of the dream he was living through her. In modern life, this tragedy is amplified by the narratives sold in films, in songs, and in cultural promises that love conquers all. When reality breaks through those promises, the man feels not just betrayed by her, but betrayed by the very idea of love. This is the tragedy of projection, and it leaves scars that devotion alone cannot heal. No relationship exists outside the reach of time. What begins with passion and energy will inevitably face the changes that aging brings to both men and women. A man who believes that the devotion of his younger years guarantees the loyalty of the future often discovers that desire does not age in the same way that responsibility does. In the modern world, this reality is even more visible because we live in a culture that glorifies youth, beauty, and novelty. Entire industries thrive on keeping people looking younger, fitter, and more appealing, and these pressures shape how attraction is experienced inside relationships. A man may believe that his years of support should outweigh the appeal of someone new, but desire does not calculate history. It responds to what is felt in the moment. Real life provides endless examples of this truth. A woman who once adored the stability of a man may begin to feel restless as her own reflection changes, and as she compares her life with others who seem to be living with more excitement. Aging can make people feel invisible, and the search for validation can become stronger than loyalty. In workplaces, gyms, or even casual gatherings, new connections can awaken a feeling of vitality that contrasts sharply with the routine of a long relationship. Men are often blindsided when years of dedication lose to a moment of novelty. But this happens because desire is not bound to the past. The tragedy is not that time passes. The tragedy is that men expect love to remain untouched by it. Betrayal in these cases is not only a rejection of the man, but also an attempt by the woman to escape her own fear of fading youth. Time reshapes desire, and those who ignore this truth suffer the most. No man lives in isolation, and no relationship is protected from the influence of comparison. In earlier generations, people measured their lives against their neighbors or relatives, but today, the scale has widened. A woman can compare her relationship with thousands of others instantly, seeing snapshots of luxury vacations, public displays of affection, or men who appear more ambitious and exciting than the one she comes home to. Even if much of what is seen is exaggerated or staged, the impact is real. Comparison plants seeds of doubt, and those doubts can grow into resentment. A man who once seemed enough can begin to look ordinary when viewed through the endless lens of alternatives. This constant exposure creates a pressure few relationships can withstand, because the imagination begins to feed on the illusion that something better is always within reach. In everyday reality, this plays out in subtle but destructive ways. A woman may begin to criticize the life she has not because it is failing her, but because she has been conditioned to expect more. She may look at colleagues, friends, or even strangers and feel as if her own relationship is holding her back from a life she deserves. For men, betrayal that comes from this kind of comparison is especially painful, because it is not always about who they are, but about who they are not. They cannot compete with every imagined alternative, nor can they live up to every fantasy fueled by outside images. The tragedy lies in the fact that contentment is harder to achieve when endless comparisons are available, and what once felt stable can suddenly feel inadequate. When betrayal grows from comparison, it reveals not the failure of love, but the failure to resist the illusions that comparison creates. Many men assume that once a woman has chosen them, the hardest part is over, and that security is now guaranteed. They believe that commitment, marriage, or shared history creates an invisible shield against betrayal. Yet the reality is that security in relationships is often an illusion. In today's world, the options available to people are greater than at any time in history. A simple conversation at work, a reconnection with an old friend, or even an innocent interaction during travel can ignite possibilities that bypass years of stability. Security feels natural to men because they invest themselves fully, but to a woman who feels emotionally or mentally unfulfilled, security can transform into suffocation. What men call loyalty can sometimes be felt as limitation by women who see other paths opening around them. This illusion of security is constantly challenged by modern realities. Careers require travel. Cities are filled with endless strangers, and digital communication allows secret conversations to develop in silence. A man who provides stability may assume he has built an unshakable foundation, but if she begins to crave something different, the very walls that symbolize safety to him may feel like barriers to her. Real life shows this in stories of men who worked tirelessly to provide only to discover that provision alone was not enough to keep her attention. Security cannot stop desire, and security cannot silence discontent. When betrayal occurs in this context, it is rarely about the absence of care, but about the weight of certainty that dulls the thrill of possibility. Men who understand this truth stop relying on the illusion that commitment guarantees permanence, and they begin to see that love survives only where choice is continually renewed, not where security is blindly assumed. Every act of betrayal leaves behind more than heartbreak. It leaves behind a change in the man who experienced it. Some men harden, becoming cautious and guarded, while others collapse under the weight of confusion, unable to understand how devotion could be met with disloyalty. This cycle often repeats itself across generations. Sons watch their fathers endure betrayal. Brothers hear stories whispered in the family. Friends warn one another of the dangers, yet the pattern persists. Modern life only magnifies this cycle because relationships today are shaped not just by personal bonds, but by shifting cultural expectations. What was once considered stable can now seem temporary, and what was once built slowly can now dissolve in an instant. Men who ignore this cycle are left unprepared, while those who recognize it learn that betrayal is not rare. It is part of the landscape of human connection. The reality of this cycle is visible everywhere. A man who is betrayed once may carry suspicion into every new bond, unable to trust fully again. Another may overcompensate, giving even more in the hope that devotion will secure loyalty, only to discover that generosity does not guarantee fidelity. Workplaces, gyms, and even friend groups show examples of men who invest everything, yet still watch it slip away. The cycle is not broken by denial, but by understanding, and it is only when men face the truth that betrayal is not always about failure, but about human desire, change, and dissatisfaction, that they can protect their strength without losing their ability to love. If betrayal is a recurring cycle, then the question every man must ask is simple. What does it mean if the women we love most are also the ones most likely to betray us?